Good morning, everyone. We will begin momentarily. Good morning, everyone. I am Kim Rawlinson, and I'm Community Health Worker Program Manager with the Center for Community Health Alignment. And we would like to thank you for joining today's webinar, Sharing the Mic, Elevating Our Collective Voice. This webinar is part of an interactive 4-part series discussing equity through meaningful community engagement. Today's focus is on power sharing, looking at ways in which organizations share power with communities by discovering and building on existing assets while balancing roles between themselves, community, and community leaders. Trying to go to the next slide. So here is an overview of the webinar for today. We ask that if you would, please be so kind to put your name, your role, organization, and state in the chat, that would be greatly appreciated so that we have an account of who's attending today's session. This session is being recorded and will be available on our website in a few days. We will look at community power and how it advances health equity. We have 4 dynamic presenters or speakers with us today who will share their perspectives and how they operationalize elements of power sharing in their work. Then we will have a Q&A session at the end, which will allow you to ask the individual presenters questions or make any comments that you would like. You are welcome to begin putting your questions in the chat while each presenter is sharing, but we will hold questions until all the presenters have had an opportunity to share. Please save the date for our final webinar number 4, which is taking the stage, activating and engaging communities, which will take place on January 30th, 2023 at the same time, 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And we will look at where do we go from here? An interactive look at projects from start to finish and how you build that momentum on existing projects and sharing those ideas for how to build a vision around equity through meaningful community engagement. At the end of today's webinar, you will have an opportunity to register today for that session. Participants will be able to describe how power sharing advances health equity, understand top-down versus bottom-up approaches, and discuss how building community agencies, building power with community members, and those opportunities for elevating community members' leadership. So a little bit about the Center for Community Health Alignment. We are a community-focused organization within the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina. And our mission is really to use evidence-based models and those meaningful community engagement strategies to co-create those solutions alongside communities, community leaders, community residents, to advance health equity. There are 3 core initiatives of CECHA, with the first being PASOS, which utilizes the community health worker model to connect with the Latino communities to provide services and resources. The Community Health Worker Institute helps to advance the community health worker workforce. And then there's EMCE, which is Equity Through Meaningful Community Engagement, which focus on advancing those meaningful community engagement strategies to really help communities lead in decision-making and change efforts within their communities. So EMCE, which is where this interactive series falls under, seeks to engage and empower communities using these strategies, bridging those assets. So building on the assets, the knowledge and resources of communities to better understand and address health inequities, and being innovative in developing and co-creating approaches to advance inequalities and enhance authentic community engagement. So as we know, community engagement is not a new approach, it's not a new strategy, but despite many efforts, this type of work continues to be challenging, and we have not always done a great job in getting it right. So power sharing is one of the components of meaningful community engagement and is really critical to this process as it helps to bring about sustainable changes in communities most impacted by health inequities. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation defines community power as the ability of communities most impacted by inequities to act together to voice their needs and hopes for the future and to collectively drive structural change, hold decision makers accountable, and advance health equity. So how does power sharing advance health equity? And we do have 4 speakers who will share their perspectives on how power sharing does this. But just to help to set the stage for today, evidence now shows that putting more power in the hands of more people, including those impacted by these structural inequities, results in systemic changes in the ways people make decisions and benefit all. Powerlessness is a structural barrier. And these power imbalances are the roots of many of the issues that impact health and well-being. And we do understand that change is more lasting and more impactful when those who are most impacted are involved in the efforts that mostly impact them. So we must begin to recognize each other's strengths, each other's shared values and interests, share decision-making, and engage in authentic, intentional community engagement. And again, we have a line of speakers here today who will share their work in power sharing. And our first speaker for today is Dr. Deborah Billings, and she is an activist researcher who works locally and globally. She loves mentoring students and has been teaching qualitative methods and a course on mutual aid for several years. She serves as senior advisor for Group Care Global and is an adjunct associate professor at the Gillen School of Global Public Health and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. For the past 25 years, she has worked globally on sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice, and serves as a consultant to organizations, including the World Health Organization, the United Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, and the Fund for Global Health Rights. Welcome, Dr. Billings, and I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And will you advance the slides? Okay, fantastic. Well, I am so honored to be part of this series. And so I'm going to keep it brief, knowing that we have other speakers. And what I'm most excited about is engagement with all of you and the conversation. So I am coming at this presentation from a number of years of work that really I've tried to put into practice over my lifetime, but really got more formalized in April of 2020 with the pandemic, right? A familiar date to all of us. And with some other really friends, especially in the public health world, we got together and said, this is going to be really bad for everyone. And this is going to be particularly bad for people with limited resources, limited access to resources, people experiencing directly every single day that level of powerlessness that Kim was referring to. And so we started an effort under the rubric of mutual aid. So I really want to talk about what mutual aid is and how it can be, and I think should be, incorporated as an approach in all of the work that we're doing in and with communities. So this first graphic, I won't go over this too much because I want to get to the definition, but what it highlights, it's a set of infographics that we created right away that really highlight some of the basic elements of mutual aid. We developed a hotline to connect people to resources, community care to deliver supplies and provide support, skill shares, sharing your gifts of skills and getting other people familiar with certain skills, gathering information, connecting, organizing, planning, aiding, and making the road by walking the road. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into each of these dimensions, but yeah, if we could go to the second slide, please. Okay, so this was the kind of logo, right? The, the marker that we created of Mutual Aid Midlands for South Carolina. And I'm going to take a definition from a group called the Big Door Brigade and just say briefly, what is mutual aid? It is solidarity, not charity, and I'll talk about what that means in a second. And it is also a form of political participation in which people take responsibility for caring one another and changing political conditions, not just through symbolic acts or putting pressure on the representatives in government, but by actually building new social relations that are more survivable, with people jumping in to participate because they want to change what is going on right now. So a mutual aid approach does not exclude putting pressure on representatives in government, but really what it says is, in a lot of ways, there are many systems that don't work. So trying to continue to work through certain existing systems is going to get us to the same results. And that sort of mutual support and working in community together to then develop an analysis and data for going back to those systems and putting pressure on and to actually change systems in some cases is what mutual aid is about. So yeah, if we could go to the next slide. This is a graphic that Big Door Brigade has created, and I just wanted to point out that the website is there available for everyone. It is chock full of resources. We can't even begin to scratch the surface in today's presentation. But again, that resounding call, not for charity, but for solidarity. And the next slide describes just a bit what that means exactly. So in a charity approach, we often take a narrow view, look at the problem, develop resources, give those resources, but without an analysis of power dimensions, hierarchies, and quite honestly, a level of paternalism that people can experience. It's sort of boiling it down to, I have, you don't, I'll give, you receive. I'm not asking you what you want to receive, but you should be grateful for what you receive. And that is at the heart what we are trying to, quite honestly, undermine with a mutual aid approach, which takes a very broader view, much broader view, and looks at the problems, but also looks at the causes. What are the influencing factors and what are the solutions, really getting at those root causes. So any of you who are in public health or practice public health, whether you use that label or not, are very familiar with the importance of this, right? And so there are a lot of connections between mutual aid and the ways in which we're trying to practice, in my example, public health. So one mutual aid activist that has been working with Mutual Aid Midlands since the very beginning, Penny Cothran, she talks about how, in a nutshell, mutual aid means reciprocity. It takes the charitable model and flips it on its head. It's not about keeping doors open first and then serving people second. And again, let's open up the conversation, because some of this stuff that I'm saying is pretty powerful, and I want to have a conversation about it. And that sense that everyone is a giver and everyone is a taker at some point in their life, or a recipient. And so it's really drawing in on those kinds of experiences and that mutuality that we're trying to, without being artificial, let me say. We're not saying, oh, let's all hold hands and, just because we say we want to break down hierarchies and power dimensions, that they disappear. That's not what we're talking about. There's a constant recognition of those power dimensions and really trying to actively engage with what that means and how we work differently. The other thing I'll just say, the last thing on this slide is mutual aid does not, if it's practiced in its truest form, does not have any strings. So we never ask, for example, in all of the funding that we've received, donations and such, people reaching out and the kinds of initiatives that we've done, we never ask people to fill out forms. We never ask them to justify their need. Okay, so the next slide. So I'll just say quickly, when we launched Mutual Aid Midlands, again in April of 2020, we started working really intensively throughout the summer and thought it would be very beneficial to have a class about this at the university. And since I'm affiliated with the University of South Carolina, that's where this class has been housed through the Honors College. And the class really focuses on mutual aid and solidarity to give students experience-based learning on how to build or rebuild those social relations and shift power. Do we accomplish that in one semester of a class? Of course not. But I will say, in looking at students' projects and then final reflections and their final paper, they are moved in certain ways. And again, we can talk about what those are, but really finding that the critique of sort of the ways in which so many of them come to the class, having volunteered in high school, maybe through a church group or such, really wanting to go back and look at more critically at how some of the ways in which things can and should be changed. And so the last slide, I will say, focuses on the importance of self-care and self-care to avoid burnout, self-care to also re-energize and be able to engage in that constant self and group critique of how we're doing things, what we're doing, how the connections are or are not being made. And so self-care has many different forms, but this is one that I use in the class and that we've used in our Mutual Aid Midlands group. It comes from the Audre Lorde Collective. The important thing here is to define, what your ask or your action is, and then ask really critically, not just like, what are my resource needs to reach that, but what do I need in terms of my body, my heart, my mind, and my community? And then really writing out explicitly, who can support me in these different areas? And what we find again and again is that shifts over time. It's different for different actions or events. And it really has helped all of us, including the students, to make explicit, the range of resources that they have and that they didn't necessarily realize explicitly, and work on those different dimensions, all of which are intersectional. So I'll end there, and excited about the conversation and about the following presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing that. You can now begin putting your comments or questions in the chat if you would like, or you can wait to the end and come off mute to ask your question. And we're going to move along to our next speaker, Erin Johnson, who will share a perspective on power sharing, a funder's perspective on power sharing. But first, I'll read her bio. Erin Johnson has worked in the nonprofit field for over 20 years with a focus on reproductive health, disease prevention, capacity building, and philanthropy. As Vice President for Community Investment at Central Carolina Community Foundation, she leads the foundation's efforts to increase its impact in the Midlands of South Carolina. She oversees competitive grant making, scholarship programs, and program-related initiatives. She also implements community engagement strategies that help connect community needs and opportunities with available resources. Additionally, Erin spearheads the One SC Fund, South Carolina statewide disaster relief fund that has granted more than $8 million to nonprofits responding to state-declared disasters and the COVID-19 pandemic. Erin currently serves on the Community Foundation Advisory Committee for Southeastern Council of Foundations, Executive Committee for SC Grant Makers Network, and the Board of Trustees of Richland Library. She previously served as a health educator for the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, an instructor at Baylor University, and in various roles at the South Carolina Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, including the Chief Community Investment Officer. She is a program planner at heart, enjoys helping practitioners translate research into practice, and leads with empathy and equity. She is a proud alumnus of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and the University of Wisconsin, La Crosse. She has been named a Woman of Influence by Columbia Business Report, the state newspaper's 20 Under 40, and is a Raleigh Institute Diversity Leaders Fellow. In her spare time, she enjoys watching the Tar Heels and Carolina Panthers, walking while engrossed in This American Life podcast, reading, and spending time with her husband and daughters. Welcome, Erin Johnson. I'm going to now turn it over to you.
Thank you. I didn't expect the whole entire bio, so I appreciate you. No, I thank you for that introduction. I am Erin Johnson. I am with the Community Foundation here in the Midlands of South Carolina, and I know that some of you are not from around here, but I'm sure you all have a community foundation that is located where you are. So I want to spend a little time today just so you know what a community foundation is and how it sort of works, that sort of makes sense for you, but also talk to you about how our foundation at least is trying to do more around power sharing and shift up our grant making and how we're working in and with community, recognizing the historic role of philanthropy sort of moving forward. So I'll give you our example and then would love to have some conversations about what that looks like, what we're getting right, what we're getting wrong. So thank you for that. And I'm so glad to go after my friend Debbie because she is amazing. And I've learned a lot from her over the years. So it was great to hear sort of her talk some about mutual aid, and she touched a little bit about how that's different from philanthropy. So I appreciate following her. Central Carolina Community Foundation, you see our mission there is to promote, facilitate, and increase philanthropy to create a sustainable impact within our community through responsible giving. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit as well. We have a board. We run by all the same rules and regulations as a charitable organization in our state. We serve 11 counties in the Midlands of South Carolina. Most community foundations are geographically based. Most are probably not as big geographically as our foundation. There are some wonderful things about that, but some difficult things about that as well. If you're familiar with sort of our area, the needs of Richland County, which is state capital, the seat for our state university and 8 other universities, it's very, very different than the needs of some of our more rural communities. And they look very different and their needs are very different. So we have to really be mindful of that whenever we're doing work with community, that we can't bring our hat of here in sort of an urban area with the resources that we have, maybe to some other communities. A community foundation is made up of a collection of funds. We have over 488 funds here, and the market's down, so we have about 170 million in assets. We are one of the larger funders in the Midlands of South Carolina. Last year, we awarded over $16 million and have awarded over $236 million since our inception. But most of that is donor directed. So if you know anything about community foundations, these are donor advised funds, the vast majority of them. So while our board and our staff may be very interested in funding in a specific way or in a specific way, I should say, most of this is donor directed. So they can give how they want, when they want, to whomever they want. And we are here as a resource for them if they so choose to provide some guidance on that process. We do try to make sure that that is all operating in a way that is ethical. Obviously, it's got to be ethical, but in a way that really reflects the needs of their community. So we'll go to the next slide. And forgive me, because I think it still says click to add title on that. Oh, good. Thank you. Took it off. Thank you. So we want to always acknowledge, and it would be disingenuous not to, that philanthropy comes with power and has a long sort of history of power, right? We acknowledge that much of the funds that are used for big philanthropy, like a community foundation or a private foundation or a corporate foundation, it does come from a long history of taking those funds from and by marginalized communities on the backs of many people who are marginalized. People have built their wealth over generations and have taken wealth from communities as a result. So we recognize that. We have to be honest about that. And we also are honest, or trying to be more honest about the fact that so often foundations have wielded that power in a way that is certainly not in community with nonprofits and with the community that's being served. Sort of what Debbie had mentioned earlier, which is, basically trying to give the way I want to give and to who I want to give, and not asking what it is they need and what is best for that community. And so that is something that we at Central Carolina, at least, and many other foundations, I need to say this is a conversation being had in all the foundation circles that I am in, is how do we do philanthropy different? Philanthropy really stands for, it means by definition, the love of man. And so how do we do this differently? Recognizing that because we do have money, inherently there is power behind that, but how do we do that in a respectful way to share that power? So with us, we're not like some foundations very much are on the ground working with community. We're sort of a step up. And so we work with sort of the intermediaries, right? The nonprofits who are working with the community on the ground, or donors who are giving to those communities, and then sort of the community at large from there. So I recognize, and our staff recognize, that we're not doing the service. And we don't know what's best for that specific community because we're not on the ground there, unless we actually live there, right? So that's something that we are recognizing as community foundations, that we're sort of a step removed from that. And we are doing a better job of trusting those who are on the ground to acknowledge what those needs are and what needs to be done. So just wanted to kind of recognize who our audience actually is. You see there are priorities that we have. I mentioned our donor advised funds. We really look more at like livability and quality of life in our community foundation. So there are some that are specific to, for example, housing or disease prevention or anything like that. But we're more general, to be honest with you, around livability and quality of life. So that kind of looks a little different for us as well. And we are also trying to, what we say, increase philanthropy. And so there is the idea when you talk about power sharing, is recognizing we're not the only ones who can give, and that all of us give, as Debbie said, all of us give at some point, and all of us have to receive at some point. And so we're trying to let the community at large recognize their power to be able to give at some level. And so we're also working some with that as well in that area. And then we do some things around, I mentioned, I think you saw it in my bio, that I still have a heart for nonprofit capacity building, because I do believe that folks know what's best for their community, but sometimes if this organization around them is struggling or is not as effective or as efficient as it could be for various reasons, that is hurting their end product, which is to serve, right, which is the program part. So we are looking some more around, and because again, most of our donors are giving, millions of dollars in this area, we're trying to increase the impact of their gifts by ensuring that the nonprofits they're giving to have a higher level of effectiveness and efficiency around just organization level capacity. So we also are prioritizing now, when you talk about, power and where we're giving, we did step back and say, who are we giving to? And we assess now, looking at the organizations, where they're located. We recognize the vast majority of our dollars we're staying here in Columbia, Richland County, and we're not going to the other 10 counties. And so we are now looking at, is funding going to our more rural counties who typically have a higher need? We're also looking at who is leading those nonprofits and if they are led by Black, Indigenous, Latinx, people of color, and serving those same communities. So we used to be somewhat hesitant to ask about the demographics of a nonprofit, like as we thought maybe that would offend of some way, I don't know. But we also were very conscious that we were not going to ask a question if we weren't going to do anything about it. So the work that we've been doing in our department, in particular our grant making department, is I'm not going to ask the question if I don't plan on doing anything with that information. Now that we have goals to do something about that, we are going to ask your organization, tell me, who is leading it? Who's the executive staff? Are they a person of color? Who are your board? What's the breakdown of their racial and ethnic background? And then we ask, who are your clients? And what's that racial breakdown? So we can see if they align, and ideally they should. And then we also are shifting now to multi-year unrestricted general operating support grants, which is new for us. But as Debbie mentioned, 2020 smacked us all in the face, and it gave us a really good opportunity to turn the whole cart over and say, now we have an opportunity to do what really needs to be done. We knew the general operating support unrestricted grants were what is needed by nonprofits. From my history working in nonprofits, I knew that's what was needed. And this was a real opportunity to change that. And so we're doing that more now as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that when it comes to sort of power sharing. And then we also run a giving platform called Midlands Gives, and we kind of see that as our way of democratizing philanthropy. It's basically an inventory of over 540 nonprofits that are located here in the Midlands of South Carolina. So anyone can go on there and search these nonprofits, know that they're vetted as a 501c3 charity, and they can search it by what county they're in, what service they're providing, what sort of service area, as well as whether or not they're Black led or Black benefiting. So you can kind of dig a little deeper depending on your giving. And we reduced the minimum gift down to $10. And we have seen that a number of donors has increased dramatically when we did that. It's finding a vehicle for ways for people to give and be part of a sort of a community-wide initiative. And we've seen that increase dramatically. So we've been pretty happy about that, some of that work. All right, next slide. So specific to sort of power sharing, and I'm hoping this gets to sort of some of the things you guys are looking for and are interested in discussing, but we are doing a better job of recognizing that what we want to be known as more than just having fiscal resources, having money. We think that the Community Foundation has other things that we can give, and we know that we have that. And so we're trying to do a better job with that. So yes, we give money, and we are expected to give our money. We have a goal that no less than 90% of our dollars is going to go out, of our unrestricted funds are going to go out, and we typically get around 98% or so of that. So we don't leave money on the table and hold it back for some other time. And so that's certainly what happens. But we also believe that we have some social capital for sure that we can lend. And we recognize when we're in a room, especially with donors or other funders, for us to be able to say, hey, have you heard of this organization? They are doing really great work. We've been working with them. And that does go a long way. And so we're trying to be better about that, and being in relationship with our nonprofits and being able to advocate and promote them as we partner with them. We also have been diversifying our board, our donor, our staff. I'm very happy to say that half of our staff now identify as a person of color, which it was not that way just when I started 6 years ago. And so that's been great. We actually mirror our community, because here in the Midlands, South Carolina, about 50% of the population are people of color. So that's good. Our staff is starting to be that way. Our board is trending that way. Finally, we're about 30 or 40% now with that as well. And then our grant making, our grantees, we finally have been much more intentional about saying we want to fund organizations that are led by people of color. We want to fund organizations that are found in our rural communities, and really being more open about that. There was some hesitancy for a while that people who are typically, let's be honest, in positions of power, being here in the counties here in Richland County, maybe being a part of a more prominent nonprofit, who thought they might get left out. And guess what? There's enough to go around. And that's what we recognize, that you'll still get some and others will get some as well. And so we've had those conversations much more now, and no one, well, they might feel left out, but we're not going to argue with the fact that those in need it, then we're going to give. And so, like I said, we're really doing more around that. We also, as mentioned, run the statewide disaster response fund. And I think this is one of our better examples of trying to be better about power sharing. And so the pandemic hit, and we decided to activate that fund, and it would be the first time the fund was used in all 46 counties. Typically, it's in response to floods or hurricanes, so it's 12 or 13 counties in our state. This was all 46 counties. And so it became a massive undertaking to deploy funds. And to be honest, in parts of the state that I don't have any connections, right? I might know one or two people that live there, but that's really about it. And so we were finding ourselves sort of funding blind, right? Who wrote a good application? And so that is not how you as a funder, it's not how we as a funder want to be able to give. We want to be able to know a little bit more about the needs of the community and who the community trusts. Especially in a time of the pandemic, when there was a lot more people in need than had ever been before in at least our recent time. So the first round of grant making, I'll be 100% honest, it was really sort of those, high level grant folks who were on our committee, who were on, the boards of the United Ways and of community foundations and other foundations around the state. And we would say, that's who we typically fund, and we would just kind of go with that. And then luckily by year 2, we took a breath and we said, we have to do this differently. We're entering our second year of real high needs in our state, and how are we going to do that differently? And so we changed our grant making committee completely. And I think some of you on here might actually have been on our committee, but we combined folks who were content experts, so maybe they knew about housing or education or human services, who were working and knew what was happening at the state level, what was happening at the ground level as best practices that were going on. We also added what we considered community experts, so people from each of our regions who were on the ground, knew their community, and we said specifically to them, we now also are going to prioritize our counties. So we ran data and identified the counties priority 1, 2, 3, and 4. Priority 1 being the counties that have been hit the hardest by the pandemic. And we're going to start our funding there. And if we run out by the time we get to priority 4, so be it. And that's what we did. And so we started with the highest priority counties, and we did not get much pushback because we were able to show, listen, these are the counties that are really needing it. And so we ended up simplifying our grant application as well. We called folks if we needed to that said, tell me what you meant to say here, and I'll write that differently for you so that it makes sense to our committee. We said, these are what we think your needs are. Click them if that's the case. If not, write in what these needs are in your community, and we'll trust you on that. And so we were able to get dollars out the door to our highest priority need counties. And we did ask for data on the back end. I saw your question, Julie, but we did not ask people to take we said your estimate. Estimate the percentage of folks that were Black, estimate the percentage of folks that were Latinx. And the services that you provided. We didn't need specific hard data. We just asked for that because we didn't want that to be a barrier to anybody accessing needs and services. So it spanned the range. We had some folks who were doing mental health services for their EMT, right? We did, because of the trauma that they were seeing over the pandemic. We had all the way to direct food service, right? After school programming. So it was across the board. People coming to us saying, these are the needs of my community, and we then trusted our committee to say, oh yeah, by the way, that is an organization people go to, or nobody in my community goes to that organization, just so you know. So we were able to do that. And we also typically did not fund organizations that were not embedded in that community. If they were not housed in that community, we typically were not funding them because we wanted people who were in that community, serving that community, and being trusted by that community. So we did less of the somebody coming from outside, dropping in, providing a service, and leaving again, unless they had an on-the-ground partner. So that's really the most we've done around power sharing with some of our grant making. We've been leaning more into trust-based philanthropy. Just today, we had we got a new fund, which is exciting, to really work around women and girls. We said, can we do general offering sports grants again? Can we trust these organizations know what's best to be able to say, here's funding, $10,000 a year, and you do what's best with that money. for what you need for your organization. And so we've been doing much more of that. And we are trying to be in partnership with our nonprofits, as opposed to, we want to be more than just a funder. Now, they might just want to be us to be a funder, but we would like to be more than just a funder. We want to be a partner with them. I recognize that no one's going to share but so much probably with a funder, but we hope that they do and tell us where they need more support or less support. And that's our goal as a foundation moving forward. We do it on a smaller scale at this point, and our goal is to spread that out a little bit. We are serving over 550 nonprofits in our state, so we're doing our best to do something for everybody, but to go deeper with others that do want to be in community with us. So that's sort of our story around power sharing. We have a lot to learn, but I clearly remember what it felt like to be on the ground providing direct service, and then feeling as though you weren't getting the support you needed from philanthropy, and you had to jump through these hoops and do something very specific for this random little project they wanted us to do, as opposed to what was really needed to be done. And so we're doing our best to try to change some of that here at Central Carolina Community Foundation. And that's good for me. Oh yes, thanks. That's our handles, right? You can always check us out there. We did get an online system finally, and I think it's been better. Now our nonprofits are able to save their work as they go, save their profiles. If they've answered that question once before, they can just copy it from one application to another. So like they're constantly giving us the same information over and over again. So we're trying to decrease the amount of just busy work. And we do ask, how long does it take you to do it? And then we say, was it worth it? For this $10,000 grant, was it worth the number of hours they had to put into it? So we're trying to be more introspective with some of our work and be a little more efficient. So, but these are all of our handles and a way to get in touch with us as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin, for that presentation. Great strategies and perspectives from our first two speakers. Now we're going to move right along to our third speaker. And just want to remind you, if you do have questions, you are free to begin dropping them in the chat, and we will be sure to ask as many as we can when we get to the Q&A part of the webinar today. And also, I want to remind you, if you are recently joining the webinar, if you would, please put your name, your role, your organization, as well as your state in the chat. Thank you so much. All right, next up, we have Mike Young, and he is going to share a model or a community event that is really a cross between PASOS and EMCE, and how they really incorporated local voice in this process. So Mike Young is a community health worker, a cultural anthropologist, the director of equity, diversity, and inclusion for the Center for Community Health Alignment, overseeing the Equity Through Meaningful Community Engagement initiative, a screaming word artist, published poet, proud PhD dropout, storyteller, and self-described recovering academic. Mike conducted research with remote indigenous communities in the jungles of Guatemala, spending almost an entire year living with them, participating in their typical daily life activities, and was irreversibly altered through the process of earning the trust of entire communities, being the only outsider, and collaborating with them in ways that worked best for them. After receiving all but dissertation status in his doctorate program, he decided to leave academia. Mike wasn't interested in only studying community, how people connect, share, support, and understand one another. He is passionate about putting those principles into action and positively impacting the livelihoods of others. Mike enjoys infusing advocacy in creative ways and understands the power that storytelling has for humanizing others, generating empathy, and ultimately changing people and structures. Mike is a Diversity Leaders Initiative at the Riley Institute Fellow, a Board of Directors member for South Carolina Community Economic Development, the DEI Chair for the Board of Directors of the Blue Ridge Institute for Nonprofit Leaders, a member of several equity and inclusion coalitions, and regularly gets invited by state, regional, national, and local governmental and non-governmental entities to speak about diversity, equity, inclusion, implicit bias, anti-racism, and other social issues. Other interesting bits of info about Mike: his mom is from El Salvador. He used to keep bees. He has a giant tortoise, and he won the okra eating contest at the Irmo Orchestra 6 years in a row. And he is a singer of a socially conscious rock band, The Haves. Welcome, Mike Young.
Hey, all right. Thanks so much for reading that. Yeah. So I'm going to be talking about Voces Comunitarias and our role in it, how it got developed, how it got started, and how it kept changing. So what Voces Comunitarias was in 2017, the previous administration was really ramping up the scapegoating and the xenophobic kind of perspectives towards the Latino community. And a lot of partners wanted to get involved and see what we could do to kind of provide that solidarity, that mutual aid, and PASOS and other activated partners throughout the Midlands started having meetings on let's develop something to get individuals in the community to network, to strategize, to learn from each other, and do it in a way that makes sense, and not make it have that typical conference vibe that is typical for representatives of organizations. We want to make it feel comfortable for store owners and activated community members. So a lot of intentionality went into it about the registration forms in Spanish first. What do we use? Eventbrite or Google Forms? Which one is more approachable? How do we get the word out? Facebook, because that's typically the platform that we utilize as the most popular. So the first year, it was held entirely in Spanish in Colombia, and that was 2017. And we had breakout groups, and we had a speaker we brought in. It was done entirely in Spanish. And I have a video that kind of outlines what that looked like. Voces Comunitarias is an event designed to bring Latino community members together towards making positive change. Each year, the event is designed differently, and for 2018, we plan to have inspirational voices of our immigrant youth, along with workshops for community organizing, skill building, networking, and peer-to-peer learning that cover regional as well as national approaches. Held entirely in Spanish, the goal is to organize around big issues like racial, political, and economic justice, defending our rights, unity, and expressing solidarity. Help us make September 22nd a success. For more information, find us on Facebook. So a lot has changed. Oops, let me go back. A lot has changed throughout the years, and that's the interesting thing about this. It's an adaptable model that we keep modifying based on where we go with it and who's involved, which I think is really great. But one of the interesting things is that it's always very vibrant. The first year we had a puppet show, and it was this politically kind of minded but still entertaining puppet show put on by Palmetto Luna Arts. They're one of the main organizers. We had library representatives, but we had music that our speaker sang, and we had a panel. So some of the elements that we crafted as a group, full day on a Saturday, not a weekday, childcare was provided, food was provided, and it was free. We made sure that we didn't charge, and we wanted to make it so that everybody felt welcome and equal. And it was a great success. We had about 100 people attend. So that's been kind of our marker, like 100 people is the goal. So then the next year we started planning again. And it takes us a whole year of meetings to get there. 2018, we held it again in Colombia, and we brought in speakers that were youth talking about DACA. We're very intentional about all the pieces, like even the coffee, right? Supporting local businesses, but also getting coffee from Latin America, and just all the food, supporting a local restaurant, and having art being fused as part of it as well. There needs to be expressiveness. It needs to be lively. It's very interactive. And this year in 2018, we incorporated Zumba. So people got up and did Zumba together. And we started seeing how these elements really added to the networking piece, because that was the whole point. We wanted people to get to know each other, connect, and feel like they can reach out afterwards. And this year we developed a directory of all the attendees as well. So all the attendees have their contacts with them throughout the entire day. In 2019, okay, so yeah, the format continued all day, all in Spanish. And then we started thinking about it. Okay, maybe we need to adapt because we're losing people, we're making everybody come to us. How can we make it a little bit more applicable? In 2019, we reached out to Spartanburg leaders who wanted to get involved. And we thought, okay, what if we move it to a different site, get those people networked and really invest our efforts and our resources to get people connected. And we're going to modify it, make it half day this time. And we're going to turn it into a bilingual event where all the presentations, which is 2 breakouts, will be presented in both languages. So English and Spanish separate, they see a presentation, and then the audience changes rooms and the presenters are bilingual and they flip languages and do the same presentation again in the other language. And then we all come back together and share and Zumba again, and then go out to eat. So that, and there's art. Here's a mural of Dolores Huerta. It's collective art that everybody pitches in. And this one was a huge success. What we realized was that there are these power players in each area. And sometimes everybody knows this person and everybody knows this person, but they don't know each other. So what we saw were these spider webs of networks and constellations forming. And ever since this particular event in Spartanburg, we've heard people mention how Voces kind of helped, add momentum to some of the initiatives and connections that are ongoing still following after Voces. Then 2020, whoops, I marked that wrong. 2020, we were scheduled to go to Charleston and we were going to do that again. We always have to find local leaders willing to navigate on the ground and recruit and bring people together and walk us through the process. What are the topics that you want to hear about? What are the things people are asking for, right? We continually reflect and ask what the community could benefit from and tailor it that way. 2020, we were going to do it in Charleston, but COVID hit. So we had to go virtual. And we did a different style. We did monthly broadcasts on Saturdays. They were bilingual, so they were repeated. And we brought in conversations between local perspectives in Charleston and then other people that we know. We realized virtual is not what this is about. We even did Zumba virtual, but it just didn't have the same vibe. So we decided we're not going to do it virtual again. It needs to be in person. People need to get to know each other. So that was a learning lesson. There's a big part of learning involved in this process. We're constantly adapting. So we took off 2021 because the Delta variant was happening. And then 2022, we decided to move it to another part of the state in the upstate, Walhalla, South Carolina, which has a 22% Latino presence in the city, but in the county, it's only about 6%. So this high concentration and very active community, we really wanted to see that get boosted and networked and strengthened. So the committee on the ground, we had a DEI committee. We were working with city council members and all sorts of other key stakeholders in the area. And they were like, let's make it a 2-day event. Let's include DEI training for workforces and leadership about getting to know communities and cultures. They thought of a walking tour, bilingual walking tour, getting to walk into the stores and restaurants of Latino-owned businesses. There was a nighttime get-together for anybody that's attending the event to have music and get to know one another. And then the next day was the half-day event where it's bilingual, everybody get together. There was Zumba or dancing again. And then there was the Hispanic Heritage Festival following that, where vendors, there was vouchers to eat at the vendors. So all of that same directory, all these other elements retained, but we just kept growing and modifying based on what was happening. So here was like a flyer for the DEI training. This is the flyer that we used for the half-day event. And I have a little video here that shows, this is a draft. We're still modifying the final one, but this gives you a sense of what our most recent one was. And this happened in end of September, so only a couple months ago.